Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Life with Zach. Today, I wanted to follow up on an earlier video I did about journaling, and especially journaling from the perspective of archivist, which that's my day job. Apart from just making videos, I work as an archivist, and I thought it would be important to share some of the tips that I've learned about journaling from my time preserving journals, reading journals, helping people do research with journals, for like the historic record, and so that you can learn more about how journals would be good for you, and what you can kind of get out of those. I'm going to link that general video down in the description, because today I wanted to get a little bit more specific and talk about 5 things you should consider putting in each journal entry. And then there's going to be a bonus one. Now, these 5 things are somewhat specific to preserving a journal for future generations to look at. So that could be, your family, eventually, the public as researchers, as your journal becomes historic records. But you also, again, have to consider your family, if you're trying to maybe share things about your life with your family in the future, but also for you. These are things that can be important to you, as you maybe have to look back and recall things 5 years down the road, 10 years, or maybe even next month if you're like me in some of these cases. So here are the 5 things that you definitely want to include in your journal entry. The first one is number one, the date. So this is incredibly critical, that you include the date that you are writing your journal entry. And I don't mean just like, 7-1. I mean like writing out the date. At the very least, the 6 numbers of the date. So the month, the day, and the full year. So like now 2021 instead of just 21. Because if you don't include that date, your journal entries aren't going to make a whole lot of sense, because you have to be able to go back and reference that with what is going on in the world, maybe, or to understand, especially if you are not writing consistently, like if you're not writing every day, you want to be able to have that there so if you go back and look and say, well, this happened on this day and have no idea what day that is, that's not going to be helpful to you. It's not going to help you recall memories. It's not going to help you do things. It's not going to help you document your life. It's definitely not going to help researchers or your family later on as they're trying to maybe understand what was going on with you. So you want to include that date. And if you don't write the whole thing out, if you just put the last 2 of the year, you have to think, by the time the 22nd century comes around, and we're at 2121, people may get confused. Just like now, people get confused with, let's say, '08. Is that 2008? Is that 1908? Is that 1808? 1708? Who knows? So it's important that you write the date on there and write the date out, so that you know what's going on and what you're talking about, when you go back and look at your journal entries, okay? Because if not, it's just going to be this kind of mass confusion that is not going, to help you in terms of journaling or help others that may look at it later. And, it's great that you can buy journals with the date on them. That can really help you. But if not, write out the date. All right. Number two, a cool thing that you can include in there is the weather. And this isn't something that people think about a lot, but 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when we were much more agrarian, there were a lot more farmers. The date was a huge thing to journal about. Or excuse me, the weather was a huge thing to journal about. People, like very simple things about the temperature and, did it rain? Was it sunny? How much did it rain? How much did it snow? And so, you know, for farmers and stuff, that was critical because they could kind of track these patterns. And now historians can look at this and track, like, what was the weather like before there was a National Weather Service? But the question then is, why is this important to us as the person who's writing down the journal? There's a couple things. Number one, the weather has a lot of influence on us. It influences what we're doing that day. It influences our mood, how we're feeling, all those things. If you don't write the weather down, um, a lot of contextual stuff is lost, both for your memory and for other individuals who may look at this in the future. So if you take the time to write one sentence about it was sunny today and in the 80s, um, then that's really going to help you as you're trying to like re-understand what went on or trying to recall what happened, because you know what, a lot of journaling is about us personally, kind of writing down things so we can come back to them later, so we maybe can understand things, and even as we take them from our thoughts and put them into writing, being able to, that kind of changeover helps us a lot. So what you're able to do is by putting the weather down, better understand, oh yeah, the rain that day impacted what I did here in terms of this, or the snow impacted how I felt. And we all know that the weather, a lot of times, is a critical part of a memory that we might have. So if we don't include that down there, it's lost. Third thing we want to include is our location. Okay, so this one is maybe more important for like future generations, but it's also a little bit important for us because if we don't write down where we are um, during a day when we make a journal entry or where we've been, then a lot of context is lost. So you have to think, if you're writing about being at the beach and you don't normally live at the beach, then how is anyone going to have any idea where you went if you don't write it down? You have to kind of assume that your journal is going to be read kind of in a silo, in isolation, because maybe something else didn't survive or something to kind of follow up. So if you don't write down what went on with your location, where you're at, then people aren't going to know that. They aren't going to know what's going on. And, if you're on a trip or you're doing something for work or whatever, and if you don't record the location where something happened or what you did, then you know what? Um, People aren't going to be able to understand what's going on, and your journal isn't going to be as good of a memory log for you as it might be. And because it's really great in a historic journal to be able to look back and someone says, yes, I was at church at this location this day and did this, or I went to such and such's wedding and it was held here. And then we are gaining a lot of depth and information about that person, the other people they interacted with, the place that they went to, and all kinds of great stuff. And you know what? Your family is going to do that if they ever look at your journal, and you're going to be able to look back because you might not remember where somebody's wedding was at some point. And if you're only writing about the experience you had without being able to jog your visual memory by looking at your writings, then a lot of that's going to be lost. The fourth thing you want to include is just a little bit about your health. Okay, because it's important to really share what's going on with your life, with your journal. And that's for two reasons. I'm going to say, number one, again, that historic perspective. If we don't understand your health, how that can impact what you're writing about, what's going on, that kind of information can be really important for future storytellers and people trying to understand our communities. It can be important in times like now with public health emergencies. What's going on? Are you sick? Do you have COVID? Do you not have COVID? Do you have something else that could have been COVID but it wasn't? Like, understanding all that is critically important. But it's also important for you because you know what? You can really see how your health impacted you. Even if you look back a week later or something, you can see what was going on. You can see maybe, if you're tracking, like some people journal in order to track like weight loss or health changes. And if you're not writing down your health, then you're not going to be able to document that. So you want to be able to keep track of your health and what's going on. So just a simple sentence about, felt good today, had a cold today, or a temperature or something is going to go a long way in helping you um, get benefit out of your journal now and in the future, because you're also kind of relieving the impacts of that health issue or anything into your journal if you're having negative health. Um, so you're kind of unloading that. So if you don't talk about that, you're leaving a big part out of it. The fifth thing that I wanted to talk about today is sharing your feelings in your journal. Okay, so a lot of people, unfortunately, really kind of in their journals just write down simple, serious things like, and they go for some reason for like these big national events. So, like moon landing today, but they didn't write down anything about like, how do you feel about the moon landing? What did you do to watch the moon landing? How did that impact you? How did that make you feel? How did that, anything about you? That's a really tragic loss for anyone in the future who maybe wants to learn about you from your journal. If you don't write down, that you were excited about the moon landing, or maybe you were angry about it, or you thought it was a hoax or whatever, they're never going to learn any of that. They already know that the moon landing happened in 1969. And honestly, probably aren't looking at your journal to figure out that information. They want to know your journal to feel about you or learn about you. And part of that is your feelings, how you feel about various things. And you know what? Your family wants to know about that because, your grandkids later on, when you're not there to help share things with them, they're looking for, what was grandpa's life like? Okay. And they're going to learn a lot more about you if you share your feelings. Okay, if you share how you reacted to stuff, then if you share that there was the moon landing today, okay, and that also is part of your experience journaling. Take the whole historic perspective, archivist, whatever out of this. A journal needs to be beneficial for you, and a big benefit of that is your mental health. If you don't write down your feelings in your journal, then it's not going to have an impact on your mental health. All right, because you want to be able to kind of again offload those things. If you're not offloading those things, you're not getting the stuff out of your journal you should be. All right. So the 5 things we talked about: date, weather, location, health, and feelings all need to be included in your journal entry. It all can be done in like one sentence, okay? Except for maybe feelings, which you kind of want to include those with everything that you're talking about. So if you talk about that you went to work today, great that you went to work today, but how did work go? How did you feel about it? What was your reaction? So you can include that in basically your descriptions of various other things. But those first 4, just one sentence, like, it's August the 23rd, 2021. The weather is hot outside with some sun and clouds. I am at work, and give where work is, and I feel great today. All right. And then as you write about your other feelings, as you do your other stuff. And then now time to throw in that bonus. What is the other thing, the 6th thing that I think is really important to include in your entry that's actually pretty simple? And that's to include the names of people. Okay. So we want to name names in your journal entry because you know what? If you just write down that you interacted with somebody, okay, and maybe you include no name, or maybe you just include your first name, their first name, then that is not helping anyone understand who that person is. And I can tell you how frustrating it is when you said, interacted with cousin in a journal entry. You know what? Interacting with a cousin does not tell who that cousin is. Okay. And probably a year from now, you're going to forget who that is. So you can't expect your family later, or you later, or at worst, a research later to try to figure out who that person is. Even, your brother or your best friend or your boss or your wife or whoever, you need to include those names in your journal entry so that what happens is you first and last name so that we can understand who they are and what impact they had on you. Because if we don't know who they are and they have a special story or a special impact or a special role in your life, then what happens is if you don't include that name, there's a huge piece left out. So take the 2 extra seconds, please. I'm asking you to just include that person's first and last name in any journal entry you make. So if you say, went to neighbor's house, instead say, went to George Jones's house. He is, neighbor George Jones. Stuff that's simple. And you know what? If you're writing about that person, you only need to include their name once if it's kind of making sense and you can follow along. All right. But you need to include that journal entry because we're never going to be able to figure out who your neighbor was if you don't write that down. All right. So the 5 things plus the bonus: date, weather, location, health, feelings, and people's names. Critically important to include in your journal for your personal health and for your personal reasons, for your family later, because you want them to know about what's going on in your life. And for me, the archivists and fellow researchers, as they're trying to learn about the history of our community, if you're at all concerned about preserving that, preserving kind of a record of your life, and please include those 6 things. So I hope you enjoyed this video about journaling from an archivist perspective. Please, again, click on the description to get a more general overview of some of the things that we talk about. If you have found value, hit like, leave a comment with any of the things you would like to add, and click that subscribe button. Based on the feedback we get, I hope to be releasing more videos about journaling as they come along, plus everything else that we talk about, like reviews, exploration, travel, and all kinds of other great stuff. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope you have a great day.